Hey, good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Wonderful to have you here. Welcome everyone to the Fourth Dimension. Big book study, that is. I'm very pleased that you guys are here, and I'm pleased that I'm here as well. And we will begin tonight, as we always do, with the set-aside prayer. If you'd be kind enough to say it with me. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps, and please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man are all about. Amen. Amen. All right, and as this is the Fourth Dimension Big Book study, I like to start off reading the two pieces of our literature that speak about the Fourth Dimension. The first is on page 8, where Bill Wilson writes, "I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness, and a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes." And then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. All right, brothers and sisters, we're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed into the fourth dimension. And for the sake of tradition, would everyone who would be willing to please put one hand up like this? And everybody put another hand up like this. And everybody go, "Oh, yeah."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I hope you guys are as happy as I am. I'm happy to see Summer here. Hello, Summer. And I mean that literally as well as more metaphorically. In Canada, summer has just arrived. And in the Big Book study, Summer has just arrived. I haven't seen you for a while, Summer. Wonderful to have you here. For anyone who doesn't know, Summer is like one of the original OGs of the Big Book Compendium worldwide. So Summer was who invited me to start participating, and that was years ago. So really cool to see you here, Summer. And where's my man, Jordan? Jordan, I saw you there for a minute. Jordan, give everybody a wave. Everyone a wave. Jordan's very special to my heart. Jordan, there he is. He's got my big book there. Jordan's one of my very newest sponsees, and he's in, can I tell everyone where you are right now, Jordan?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's in treatment right now in a place called the Drop-In Center in Calgary, which is it's not an easy place to be. It's not an easy place to be. So everybody go like this. Everybody go like this. Okay, we're all giving Jordan love right now. Okay. All right, because where he is not an easy place to be. He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine, but he needs our help, and he certainly needs God's help. And so let's get him hooked up. Let's get him hooked up with the spiritual toolkit. I heard someone, I think it was Mary, talking earlier about the power tools. I like that. Okay, we're going to talk about the spiritual toolkit tonight, baby. All right, and we're gonna talk about what that means to a guy like me, and what that toolkit is, what it functionally is. Okay. So last week, guys, we're in a chapter, There Is a Solution. If everyone would be kind enough, let's get back to it. Let's get to page 20, where we talked about the difference between moderate drinkers, heavy drinkers, and the real alcoholic of my type. Okay, I know I've been to conventions where they sell T-shirts that say, "I'm the guy on page 21." What do they mean by that? They mean that I am a real alcoholic. And we'll sometimes hear people identify, my name is Bob Smith and I'm a real alcoholic. Well, what do they mean compared to the fake alcoholics? Like, well, yeah, in a sense, because one of the things that I've been taught, and this is a bizarre thing. It's hard to fully understand this, but we have, over the years, we have had people who look like alcoholics that are defined in our book as heavy drinkers. And it even says they may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair. I'm at the bottom of page 20. They may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair them physically and mentally. And they may look for a period of time as though they are one of us, but they're not. And what happens is that they get sent to Alcoholics Anonymous anyway. They get sent to AA. And here's the danger in that. If we don't qualify them, if we don't take them through what we learned in the doctor's opinion, if we don't take them through this cycle of alcoholism, and help them to qualify or not qualify. Raise your hand if you've ever heard anyone say, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you know, nobody who's not an alcoholic ever comes to an AA meeting. Anyone ever heard anybody say that before? You know, if you're in an AA meeting, you're in the right place. I don't know that. I don't know that. We can't know that. We can't know that they're in the right place until we identify them as an alcoholic. How do we do that? We take them through the cycle of alcoholism, just like we learned in the doctor's opinion. And I'm going to open it for you here in just a minute, guys. Hang on a minute. Hang on. I'm going to open this. So part of the reason why we need to do this, guys, why we need to go through this cycle of alcoholism, I'm just going to share it on the screen for a minute. If you've never seen this, feel free to catch a screenshot. This is really one of the fundamental foundations of this big book study, of the way that I sponsor guys, of even my home group. At my home group, we have a poster of this up on the wall. We've got the 12 steps, we've got the 12 traditions, and we've got this cycle of alcoholism. This is how we qualify real alcoholics. Someone who has made a firm resolution, sworn off forever, becomes restless, irritable, and discontent during the period of sobriety, has an insane thought, believes the lie, takes the first drink, triggers the physical allergy, enters the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. Okay? And what I need to do is take this guy and make sure that he identifies. If I'm working with a newcomer, I don't know, maybe they're a heavy drinker. Maybe they don't identify with the physical craving. Maybe they don't identify with the mental obsession. Maybe they don't identify with this disease. And here's the danger. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to qualify this, guys, is what's happened over the years is that heavy drinkers have come to Alcoholics Anonymous and man, they kind of like it. It's kind of comfortable. The people are funny and it's somewhere to come hang out and like beat the loneliness, and the coffee's not bad, and the ladies look pretty or the men look handsome or whatever it is, okay? And they stick around AA. And never in a million years, in Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob's wildest fantasies, could they ever have guessed that people who weren't alcoholic were going to want to stick around in Alcoholics Anonymous. But this happens all the time. What's the danger in that? The danger in that is that the newcomer doesn't know any better. So the newcomer listens to two different people sharing. He listens to Charlie Heavy Drinker. And Charlie Heavy Drinker says this: well, you know, I just go to meetings and don't drink, and I had to focus. I went and focused on my education. I got a gym pass. I started working out a lot. You know, I just finished an Ironman triathlon, and, you know, I met my wife, and that was really it. You know, I kind of fell in love there, and, you know, I just started to get a good night's sleep, and that's really recovery for me. Okay? Newcomer hears that, and then he hears Kevin. And Kevin says, guys, anything short of a spiritual awakening and I am doomed to die an alcoholic death. Anything less than the full expression of all 12 steps in my life, and I'm at risk at all times. My life is dependent upon surrender to God, confession, restitution, and then service to others. Anything less than that, and I am in danger of drinking. That is the way it is. Of course, once that happened, I can be restored to a sane way of life, and I am in fit spiritual condition. I will be restored to sanity, but that is my way of life, and that is what is required here in Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? Newcomer hears those two options. Which one of those sounds more attractive? Gym pass, volleyball, fall in love guy, or Kevin the Big Book Thumper? Newcomer doesn't know any better. Here's the problem. If that newcomer is an actual real alcoholic, he will die being sponsored or not sponsored by a heavy drinker. Does that make sense, you guys? Do you understand what I'm talking about? I know, because I'll tell you what, man, I've from personal experience, and that's why I take this real seriously. Personal experience. I had a guy who was one of those easier, softer, middle of the road, watered down, group therapy, pop psychology, heavy drinking sponsors. And I nearly died, man. I nearly died behind that. And it wasn't until somebody, thank God, a real alcoholic whose life depended upon carrying this spiritual message, this spiritual kit of tools to another man and laying it at his feet to see if he actually was willing to pick those tools up and ask for help and how to use them. When another real alcoholic came to me and gave me this message and nothing else, this message, only then did I begin to enjoy sobriety, and only then did my life begin to be catapulted and rocketed into that fourth dimension of existence. So guys, this is why I take it really personally. I take it really personally, this part of our book. And the first time I heard guys like Chris Raymer in particular talk about this, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Chris Raymer. If you've never listened to Chris R, do not go to sleep tonight until you've listened to Chris Raymer. All right, I've never met Chris. I had the privilege of meeting Myers one time in Dallas, and those two, as they would say, they're the real McCoy. They're the real McCoy, those guys, man. I went to the Dallas Primary Purpose Group. It was a beautiful thing. First time I heard those guys talk about it, it's like a light switch went off, man. I completely understand. Completely understood what they're talking about. So that's the difference. And really, guys, at base level, what is the difference between a heavy drinker and a real alcoholic? A heavy drinker, if given sufficient reason, can stop or moderate. What sufficient reasons does it give in the book? Well, let's go to page 21. What are the sufficient reasons that a heavy drinker might be able to quit? Ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative. This man can also stop or moderate. Raise your hand if you ever had any health issues and drank anyway. Raise your hand if you ever fell in love and drank anyway. You know, Chris Raymer talks about this. Raise your hand if you ever drank when you were unemployed. Yep. Raise your hand if you ever drank when you had the greatest job in the world. Yep. Raise your hand if you ever drank when you were single. Yep. Raise your hand if you ever drank while you were in a great relationship. Yep. Raise your hand if you ever drank when you were dating Satan's own sister. Yep. Okay. It doesn't matter. And the point being, raise your hand. You had all the money in the world. Yep. We were totally broke. Yep. It doesn't matter. People like us, it does not matter. Okay. What the external circumstances are, because outward appearances are not inward reality. You know, we're going to read a story about a guy named Jim here in Fred, actually. It's Fred. Fred drinks, and it's the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. End of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. He drinks again anyway. How could that be? It's baffling. That's the baffling feature of alcoholism. But any of us, we know from the outside looking in, we know that even though it's the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon, we know that there is stormy weather going on inside of us all the time. There always was with me, and it didn't matter what was going on out there, man. My problem is my inner spiritual condition, my inner spiritual malady. I'm inner spiritual maladjusted to life. Okay, Wayne Butler at the Pacific Group talks about that. The ISM, the inner spiritual maladjustment. Okay, that's what it is. I'm restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm sober. You take booze away from me, I don't get better. I get worse. I get sicker. I get crazier. I become more suicidal. People used to say, Kevin, stop drinking and you'll feel better. And they were right. I felt depression much better sober. I felt anger much better sober, right? Man, I don't have a drinking problem. I had a drinking solution to the way that I felt. You guys with me on that? Okay. And moderate drinkers and heavy drinkers in particular, they don't have that. You take booze away from a heavy drinker, they get better. I do not. Okay. I am a real alcoholic of the hopeless variety. So with that said, guys, I just wanted to set the stage where we were at last week. Man, I'm pumped. I love this chapter. We're about to read. If you ever want to know what is Kevin Olson's favorite page in the big book, man, we're coming to it in just a minute. Page 25, man, there is just absolute treasure on page 25. Absolute treasure. So everyone, my man Brad, one of my favorite smonsees, one of them anyway, is there. Oh. And Brad, you going to do some reading for us tonight?
You betcha. Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Solotov, a recovered alcoholic.
Amen.
So we're going to start with the real alcoholic on page 21.
Brad, you'll have to remind me where we left off last week. Is that where we left off?
Honestly, I think that's the best place to start.
I like it. Let's read about the real alcoholic. Thank you, Brad.
But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here's the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
All right, so here's just an interesting historical tidbit. Does anybody know who wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Who wrote that book? There's a guy named Robert Louis Stevenson. Okay, you guys have heard of Robert Louis Stevenson before? Just maybe you've heard it. Anyway, he was an alcoholic. And so it's believed that the example of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is actually his own writing about himself and about his own experiences with drinking. I see that Carrie is screen sharing, and I'm wondering, Carrie, can I ask you to I don't know how to turn that off.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're all right, Carrie.
Yeah, I don't know how to turn it off.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's a beautiful picture.
Okay. Oh,
There you
we
go. All right.
there we go.
Rock and roll. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Okay, Brad, back to you. So anyway, Robert Louis Stevenson, the guy that wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's believed he was writing about his own alcoholism. So that example of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, very apropos. All right, let's continue.
He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decisions must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees.
All right, so just a couple of things I want to say there. Number one, I talked about this last week. He is more or less always insanely drunk. Okay. Like, guys, look, I don't know about you, but when I kind of first came to AA, I was looking for the loopholes, man. I was looking for any way to not be this thing. Okay. And I'm looking for any angle that I can find to edge my way out of AA and to not identify as this guy. And that, hey, he's more or less always insanely drunk. It's like, well, there it is. Okay, I wasn't always insanely drunk. Like, there was times when I was sober. In fact, that's one of the hallmarks of alcoholism. My grant sponsor, Clancy, says it's impossible to stay sober all the time, or to stay drunk all the time, rather. You always get sober. That's the problem. That's the problem with alcoholism. It doesn't matter. There's not enough money or booze or time in the world. Eventually, you always get sober again. You always, and filled with guilt and shame and remorse. And self-hatred and self-loathing about everything we've done, emerging remorseful, and then we all sing the alcoholic national anthem. I'm never gonna drink that way again, okay? It's the same thing all the time, okay? I wasn't always insanely drunk, but what I have to admit to myself is that when I was drinking, I was always insanely drunk. I was almost never mildly intoxicated. Who would want to be mildly intoxicated? What's the point in being mildly intoxicated? I'm looking for oblivion, man. If I'm drinking, you know, people say, oh, for us to drink is to die. Is like, yeah, if I'm drinking, I'm looking to die, man. I don't drink socially. I drink suicidally. You know, I go crazy when I drink, man. I'm a fiend for alcohol. I don't know anything about being mildly intoxicated. You know, I was talking to a guy the other day, and he owns a distillery here in Calgary, where I live, and it's called Confluence Distillery. And so this is what he does for a living. He makes vodka and he makes gin, you know, boutique stuff. Like, okay, I guess, okay, great, good. And he's not one of us at all. It's just his passion. But he says to me, yeah, we're going to start making tequila. And my ears perk up immediately, okay? Because I used to have a real problem with tequila. Anyway, so he says, yeah, but you know, it's really hard to distill, so we're gonna ship it in from Mexico. and we'll rebottle it and sell it here. I said, really? That's interesting. He says, yeah, it comes. I said, they ship it to you. He said, yeah. I said, and how do they, how do they do that? He said, well, it comes in these big, like 1,000-liter totes, those 1,000-liter totes of tequila that they send, and then we'll rebottle it. And I'm just thinking, 1,000-liter tote of tequila, that might get me through a Friday night. Okay. Because I don't know anything about being mildly intoxicated. It wouldn't last the weekend. I'll promise you that. Okay. 1,000 liters of tequila would be a good start. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about here is it says he possesses special abilities, aptitudes, promising career. He builds up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then smashes it all to the ground. Okay. And I certainly understand that, man. I think the only thing that's worse and more dangerous for an alcoholic than bad luck is good luck. I think good luck kills drunks just as fast as bad luck. And somebody told me one time that it's possible for an alcoholic to stay sober on just fellowship, on what we call meeting-based sobriety, and never ever do a step. You can just go to meetings and sponge off other people and stay sober. But he qualified it with this. He said, if you're lucky. And he said, and here's how I define luck. Nothing really bad ever happens to you, and nothing ever good ever happens to you, because something good happening to a drunk will send us off the rails just as quickly. Man, I remember a guy that I went to treatment with. He invested in some stocks. This poor dude, it's the worst thing that could have happened. He was about 2 years sober. He was still in the alumni of the treatment center we were in. He invested in some stocks, and one day he made $600,000. One day he had made $600,000, and it very nearly killed him. It very nearly killed him. And what on its face would seem like the greatest thing in the world, this guy, in spectacular fashion, this guy had the relapse. Like, this is the Guinness World Record of like relapses. And I remember watching him. He held on for about a week, and then Ron was gone. We heard no more of Ron for a while. So what we do, man, we build up these careers, and then we tear them to the ground, because good luck can often be just as dangerous for us as bad luck. Okay, back to you, Brad.
He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums.
All right. So any of you, younger guys, or, I mean, myself as well, like, very few people get to Alcoholics Anonymous these days without some tenure in the drug world. Okay. And there's a lot of discussion about, whether or not we should be able to talk about drugs and Alcoholics Anonymous. I have the solution. As long as you just talk about sedatives, Okay. And if any old timers give you heck, okay, I'll show you exactly where to go in the book, where it talks in our book about sedatives. So as long as you're just talking about drinking and sedatives, you can come to Alcoholics Anonymous and talk about sedatives all you want, and we'll know what you really mean. Okay. All right, Brad, back to you.
This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? Hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all of its attendant suffering and humiliation. Why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know. So
one of the things I want to point out, guys, I really believe this. I believe this in my own life, and I believe this in my own experience, sponsoring, hundreds of men. I really believe, and it's just my opinion, but I believe that there are two types of alcoholics. There are people who are born alcoholic. They're born with this thing. I believe I was one of those. The minute I took a drink when I was 12 years old, man, it was on. It was on and I couldn't get enough. I mean, that's why I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 17, man. Okay. I ended up in AA before I was legally old enough to drink because it just had such an immediately devastating impact. Not all people are like that. Okay. I've worked with several men who for a period of time they were hard drinkers. They didn't have the problem, but at some point, at a certain point, when a certain point is reached, little can be done for them. Okay. And I believe that there are some people who over a period of time, though they may be heavy drinkers, can drink themselves over that line. Usually there's a period of trauma of some kind. Something happens, an accident or a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job or something happens, and they drink themselves across the line from heavy drinker into real alcoholism. Bottom line, how we get there doesn't matter. The solution is exactly the same. Whether I was born that way or whether I drank myself into that doesn't matter, as much as the fact that I am that, I identify as that, physical allergy, mental obsession, then we can apply the spiritual toolkit just the same, okay? Back to you, Brad.
We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this.
Okay, guys, so up till here, we've primarily talked about the physical allergy to alcohol. Okay, that once I start drinking, it triggers within me a craving for more alcohol. My allergy to alcohol manifests itself in a phenomenon of craving for more alcohol. My allergic reaction is not a negative reaction like most reactions are. If you have hay fever, it's a negative reaction. If you are allergic to penicillin, that's a negative reaction. My allergic reaction to alcohol is extremely positive. It was the most positive thing I ever felt in my life the first time I got drunk. Up till here, physical allergy manifesting itself in a phenomenon of craving. That's primarily what we've talked about. Now we're going to start talking about something different. Now we're going to start talking about the mental obsession in greater detail. We're going to start talking about the insane thought that precedes the first drink. Okay? And when we talk about insanity in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's important. It was important for me to learn. It was important for Joe and Charlie to teach me. It was important for Cowboy Ray, who did big book studies here in town, in Calgary, to teach me that when we talk about insanity in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're talking about one thing very specifically. We're not talking about the insane things that I did when I was drinking. Those are just war stories. The insanity of alcoholism is that despite all of those war stories and swearing off, and I'll never do it again, after some period of physical sobriety, sitting alone as physically sober as I am right now, in a moment of physical sobriety, I will have an insane thought that will tell me this time it's going to be different. This time it's going to be okay. This time I'll get away with it. This time I'm just going to have a few drinks tonight. I'm going to drink like a gentleman. And one of the biggest lies I ever told myself, I'm just going to go drinking tonight. I'll go back to AA tomorrow. Can you imagine how sick and selfish that was? As a slipper in and out of AA for years, I'll let the rest of Alcoholics Anonymous keep the doors open for me, but I'm going to go out drinking tonight and I'll grace you all with my presence again tomorrow. Okay. That was the lie. And anybody think I actually made it back to AA the next day? No. Weeks, months, sometimes years, I would be gone. Whatever the lie is, this is what we're talking about. So I'm going to read this line here, Brad. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. My grand sponsor, Clancy, talks about, man, if you're allergic to orange juice, and every time you drink orange juice, your ears start bleeding, you don't need to go to meetings and get a sponsor. You just stop drinking orange juice. But orange juice doesn't do for us what alcohol does for us. Orange juice doesn't have this profound impact on my spiritual sickness, on the restlessness, irritability, and discontent, and alcohol does. And what happens eventually is that the action of alcohol on that spiritual sickness is so positive. It works so profoundly well that eventually it warps my mind into an inability to distinguish the true from the false. Okay? And we drink ourselves into this insanity. And it says, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. That's our main problem. My main problem is not alcohol. My main problem is that I have a mind that will not let me stay away from alcohol even when I'm physically sober. Physically sober, given a sufficient reason, I will drink again. Physically sober, that's terrifying. That was terrifying when I realized that every time I had an insane thought that told me it was okay to drink, I was physically sober. As sober as any of us are right now, we have that insane thought and I can't keep away from it. And I go and I pick up that drink, I trigger that allergy and I'm gone. But I just want to point something out. Some people will say that our disease is twofold, physical, mental. Some people will say that our disease is threefold, physical, mental, and spiritual. I think that they're both right, okay? They're both right. Yes, physical, yes, mental, and at base, we all have this spiritual sickness going on. How do we know that? We're about to learn in just a couple chapters, a couple pages. Dr. Carl Jung is going to teach us. He's going to give us the solution in just 1 minute. Wait, where'd it go? Hang on, I'm trying to share something with you guys. I'm sorry, I thought I had this locked and loaded. Give me a second. Oh, there it is. I always think this part must be so boring for the people that are listening on YouTube because they can't see what I'm showing you. But anyway, here we go. As we talked about earlier, okay, our problem is the grave nature of alcoholism, mental obsession, physical allergy. Our solution is what Dr. Carl Jung calls a vital spiritual experience. Well, I think it goes to reason that if a spiritual solution is our ultimate problem, or a spiritual awakening is our ultimate solution, that must mean that I have a spiritual problem. And when it says here that the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body, I think that the mind is much different than the brain. I think that the mind is much different than intellect. I think that the mind, when we talk about the mind, we're really talking about the nexus where the intellect and the spirit connect at the same point. Okay, you guys with me on that? So it says here, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in my mind, which is mental and spiritual. Okay, you guys with me on that? Let's see some nodding heads. You guys with me on that? Just making sure you guys are still awake out there. All right. Main problem is the alcoholic centers in my mind. That is intellect, that is my brain, and that is my spirit. That is where my real problem lies. Okay, back to you, Brad.
If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk.
Yeah, and so we talked about this last week, right? We read the example of the guy with a hammer smashing himself in the head to cure his headache. And we read that. I read that for years in AA, man. For years, and thinking, well, the problem there clearly is that this guy is hitting himself in the hammer and he can't stop himself from hitting himself in the head with a hammer. That is not his problem. You know what his problem is? His problem is the headache. That's the problem. His problem is the headache. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get to the root of the problem. Alcoholics Anonymous is a 12-step pain reliever to remove that headache. So there is no need to smash my... Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't ask me to just learn how to live and cope with the pain of a headache and not smash myself in the head with a hammer. Alcoholics Anonymous removes the pain in the first place. So there is no need to smash myself in the head with a hammer if there's no headache to begin with. You guys with me on that? You understand what I'm talking about? Okay. And the example, of course, is that headache is our spiritual sickness, the restlessness, irritability, and discontent. That is the headache for an alcoholic. And Alcoholics Anonymous will remove that pain. All right. The reason that I'm sober today is because I have found the same thing that I was always looking for when I took a drink. I have found a way to be easy and comfortable. I have found ease and comfort in sobriety. I don't have to drink to feel ease and comfort anymore. Through the application of the 12 steps, I have found ease and comfort. My grand sponsor, Clancy, says the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is to do very slowly what alcohol used to do quickly, which is to change our perception of reality and to remove the spiritual sickness. Okay, Brad, back to you.
Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes through a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected.
Okay, guys, so we're gonna read some more squiggly writing here. We're gonna read some more italics, okay? And so that means this is very, very key, important stuff. We're gonna read through this, and then I'm gonna talk through it a little bit.
The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink.
Okay, so I want you guys to hold these two thoughts in parallel to one another. I want you to hold in your mind what it just told us in the big book, which, let's be clear, again, this is the perfection of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is it, okay? And one of the things that I needed to learn is that not everything that I always heard in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was necessarily congruent with what's in our book. I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples that I take very personally because I think they harm a lot of people. If you are a real alcoholic of my type, of our type, presumably, it says we are unable to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation of a day, of a week, or a month ago. Okay? On the other hand, how many times have you heard in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, if I don't remember my last drunk, I'm condemned to repeat it? Well, listen, if all I needed to do was just remember my last drunk and that's a solution to alcoholism, man, I'd be at home watching Netflix, eating M&Ms, just remembering my last drunk. And we'd have a one-step program and no one would ever relapse. You'd come in and like, here's a cup of coffee and just remember your last drunk and you'll never have to drink again, newcomer, and that would be it. But I lack the ability to do that. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever heard this one? Play the tape through to the end. If you're craving a drink, just play the tape through to the end. Anyone heard that one before? Raise your hand if you've ever heard someone in an AA meeting say, play the tape through to the end. Brothers and sisters, if all I had to do was just play the tape through to the end, I'd be out playing tennis right now instead of here at this meeting, okay? That doesn't work. those types of little mind games, those cute little party tricks that people want to sell in AA meetings as solutions for alcoholism do not work. Okay. But I didn't know any better and I believed it. And I thought, well, I don't need to do those steps. I don't need to get a sponsor. I don't need to sit and do confession and inventory and restitution and go be of service to other people. I just need to play the tape through to the end. Do you see how lethal that can be to someone who is a real alcoholic? Okay. In fact, I think that idea of playing the tape through to the end probably came from like a non-alcoholic treatment center. And they're all over the place, man. These non-alcoholic treatment centers. Anyway, I won't get into all that. That's my own controversy. Suffice to say, those little party tricks, those cute little games do not work. They are not real. Okay. I need the message which can hold the interest of an alcoholic must be a message of depth and weight, man. Depth and weight. Just think through the drink, play the tape through to the end. That is not a message of depth and weight. Message of depth and weight is that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences that are real in our lives, and that anyone who will do this work can do and can find and get connected to this power that will remove your problem and rocket you into an entirely new way of life in what we call the fourth dimension of existence. That is real. That is a message of depth and weight. And that is the message. When we say we carry this message, that is the message. That is the message we need to carry in Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the message I need to make sure that I'm carrying. Okay, Brad, back to you.
The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic.
Okay, so I just want to talk about that real quick. All I want you to do is write page 84 in the margin there. Okay, where it says the type of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. I want you to write C page 84 right there. Okay, and don't skip ahead. Don't go to page 84. You'll find out. You stay the course in this big book study. I promise you, we'll get to page 84 and all will be revealed. More will be disclosed. I promise. Okay, but for now, just write that down there. Brad?
The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how." Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, "For God's sake, how did I ever get started again?" Only to have that thought supplanted by, "Well, I'll stop with the sixth drink," or "What's the use anyhow?" When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. There is a solution.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. Keep reading through there, Brad.
Almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed.
All right, so first of all, I want to point out, it says almost none of us liked doing this. And I want you guys to know, I don't like doing all that stuff either. Okay? Please, and a lot of time people think, my sponsees think that I just love doing everything that's asked of me to do. I'll tell you what, man, on Tuesday nights, you guys, I don't know if you want to hear this or not, but I'll tell you the truth. There isn't almost a Tuesday night for the big book study that goes by where I don't think at some point earlier in the day, I wonder if there's some way I can get out of having to do the big book studies tonight. Okay. Look, that's just real, man. That's just real, because I'm a selfish, self-centered alcoholic with, and I want to do what I want to do. But here's the thing, man, I have to come take my medicine. And just think, guys, I want you to know, just because I facilitate this big book study does not make me the doctor. This is my medicine. I am taking my medicine right now. Okay. This is what saves my life, being here with you guys. You understand what I'm talking about? But please don't think that I just love doing it all the time. I just can't wait to take my inventory at night. Ooh, great. Evening meditation. Hooray. Okay. Like I'm dumb. Like, no, sometimes there's a line on page 552 in the back of our book. It says the only true freedom a man will ever know is doing what he ought to do because he wants to do it. And in those rare occasions, like tonight, I'll say tonight, I wanted to be here. I wanted to do this with you guys, and I ought to be here. And so you're looking at a free man right now. I'm a man in freedom because what I ought to be doing and what I want to be doing is the same thing. And I will tell you, that's very rare. It's very rare. Most of the time, I have to drag my selfish, self-seeking, self-will little butt to be in alignment with God's will for me. And when I do, man, I feel like $1 million when I'm done. Okay. But please don't think it says most of us didn't like doing this stuff. Okay. And then it talks about the spiritual toolkit. The spiritual toolkit laid at our feet. We had to pick it up. Well, what is it? What is that spiritual toolkit? I break it down quite simply into just 4 steps: surrender, confession, restitution, service. That's it. That is fundamentally the spiritual toolkit. Okay. Here they describe it as leveling of our pride, confession of shortcomings. It requires for successful consummation. Okay. On page 263 in the back, it has the original steps of the Oxford group, but I think distilled down to their simplest core: surrender, confession, restitution, and service. And a sponsor, guys, all that a sponsor is someone who has better facility in using those spiritual tools than I do. That's it. Someone who knows how to use those spiritual tools and apply them in their own life. Okay. And that's really it. That's really it. And that's the purpose of getting a sponsor. A sponsor is someone who can help you to learn how to use those spiritual tools. Okay. And that's all I wanted to say about that, Brad. And yeah, and I love that we're going to be rocketed into the 4th dimension. Obviously, that's why we named this big book study the 4th dimension big book study. Brad, please read the next paragraph. If I'm honest, this is my favorite paragraph in the entire big book. If I had to pick one, this is it.
The great fact is just this and nothing less: that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish these things for us which we could never do by ourselves.
All right. So one of the things, guys, that as many of you know, there are a lot of lines in the book that I use as a benchmark to ask myself, how am I doing relative to these lines? Okay. So it says, the central fact of our lives is the certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. I need to ask myself, is that the central fact of my life today? Is that the central fact of my life? Or am I going to put something else in the center? Am I going to put a job in the center? Am I going to put a relationship in the center? Am I going to put politics in the center? Am I going to put finances in the center? Am I going to get myself in the center again? Okay. My experience is that when I keep God and recovery in the center, everything that orbits around that is very well. I love the idea that we live in Alcoholics Anonymous and we visit the world. When I live in AA and I visit the world is a beautiful place. When I live in the world and try to visit AA, things get a little messy. Okay. So Brad, what I'd like to do, I want to make sure that we land the plane tonight right at 7 p.m. Because one of my favorite things to do Please don't log off right after the meeting because I love going around the circle, so to speak, and asking everyone your name and where you're from. I just love everyone getting a chance to introduce themselves at the end of the thing. So don't drop off the call right away because I want to say hi to all of you, okay? Because I think this is the coolest thing on the planet, man. We got people from Alcoholics Anonymous all over the world here. How cool is that? Anyway, Brad, so let's just read through, and we're going to read the story here of Roland Hazard and Carl Jung. We went through it in depth at the beginning of the study, the early history of AA. So, Brad, why don't you just read for us? I'm going to try to shut up here as much as I can, and let's try to get done right at 7 p.m.
Okay. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Jung, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall.
The only thing I want to say for anyone who doesn't know this is that this is the story of one of the early pieces of AA history. This is the story of a guy named Roland Hazard. Okay, Rowland, Rowland Hazard. Okay, and if you want to learn more about that history, I can point you in the right direction. But this is the story of Roland Hazard and where we get step 2 from. Okay, back to you, Brad.
So he returned to this doctor whom he admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society and would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you."
Okay, guys, I just want to point out one more time. Carl Jung says here, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic, not the body of an alcoholic. You have the mind. And what did we learn earlier? That the mind it's the combination of intellect and spirit. Okay. And that's what Dr. Jung is telling him. You have the mind, the intellect, and the spiritual sickness of a chronic alcoholic. Okay. Back to you, Brad.
Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description."
So I just want to say as well, when we've all heard how it works 1,000 times, right? We all know B, the second pertinent idea, B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Well, that statement is about a couple of different things, but one of the people it's about is Carl Jung. Carl Jung is a human power. He's one of the greatest psychiatrists of all time. And he was not able to emotionally rearrange an alcoholic like Roland Hazard. Okay? Even he, a great psychiatrist, one of the greatest of all time, wasn't able to do it. And Carl Jung said, there is something else that I think can help you. And that is what I think is called a vital spiritual experience. All right, Brad, back to you.
Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in this case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator, with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters.
I want to say two things about the book Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. First of all, if you ever read it, you'll get a sense of how intelligent Bill Wilson was and some of the first members, because that book is extremely dense and extremely difficult to read. Has anyone read it or had a copy of it? It's tough, man. It's a tough read. But what's interesting is that I think our big book in a lot of ways is modeled after Varieties of Religious Experience, in that the first bunch of it is a bunch of text, and then the rest of it is all stories, very similar to our book. What I like to point out is that those stories are without exception someone who is in a place of turmoil, and a place of sometimes great trauma, sometimes great pain. Very few people come to God in the midst of a winning streak. Okay, most of us come to God in duress of some kind, and it says here, lots of people with different religious convictions. Man, I'll take a little bit from anything. I'll take from Christianity, Judaism, Islam. I love it all. And what I like to talk about here is in the Hindu tradition. Hindus believe that people who are closest to death are also those who are closest to God. And I think that has a lot to do with alcoholism and our disease. And I think it's very appropriate to mention here. So that's that. Brad, let's take us out for the rest of the chapter. And then we'll go around the circle and say hi to everybody.
We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. The end.
More like the beginning.
The end of the chapter.
Good, excellent, excellent. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And let's close the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. If you will be kind enough to indulge me in the Lord's Prayer, because I just love that prayer. I think it's beautiful. And then we landed the plane right at 7 o'clock. So good job.